I am recording. Hi out there, and welcome to the Short Story Corner. My name's Sheila, and as you probably guessed from the name, the Short Story Corner, this is where I read to you short stories that I've written, usually of a fantasy bent, for your entertainment. Thanks for joining me. So today we're getting on to part two of No Repeat Lifetime. In part one, we met two old school radio DJs, Rory Reed and Mary Midnight. Yes, I love alliteration. In addition to being radio DJs, they're also quite versed at magic, and they think local artist Jules Horace is using some seriously bad mojo to keep his song What I Lose Now playing on the airwaves. So let's listen to him talk about this and try to get down to the root of why he's doing this. All right, get your headphones on, get ready for some music. It's time for part two of No Repeat Lifetime. No Repeat Lifetime, part two. Night after night, the bar counter at Acebo supported the weight of a steady number of customers, many of whom seemed intent on slipping to the floor where downward pointing bottle spouts directed them. Acebo's was attached to the local installment of the Clifton Inn hotel chain, which meant that it was relatively clean, and most nights the manager played 80s pop metal hits over the sound system, which meant that it was fairly generic and anonymous. It was the best place that Rory and Mary could think to meet whenever they had shadowy matter soiling their palms and needed to share some dirt. "What gets me," Mary said over her martini glass, "is that it's not like Jules Horace got that big, you know? He got some attention, sure." "He could probably be huge," Rory agreed. "Sure, the song's great, but he isn't, not yet. So why waste all that first song magic when he could be so much more popular?" Mary tapped a fingernail on the tabletop. "And richer." Maybe this is all he wanted. Rory tossed back the last of his gin and tonic, but the drink had gotten watered down with melted ice and was about as satisfying as his answer. "Suppose we could always ask him once we get him cornered." "Okay, and how do you suppose we go about getting this guy in a corner, especially if he's a local it guy at the moment?" "I don't know," said Rory. "Figured you could just turn your charm on him and we could go from there." "You know," said Mary. Anyone else watching her hands might have thought she was doing nothing more than idly pushing a bead of condensation across the table. But Rory saw the minor rune forming in the pattern she was drawing. He gripped the edge of the table and braced himself for a headache at the very least. "Maybe I don't want to be the charm ambassador all the time," said Mary. "Maybe I just want to be angry." Rory said nothing but kept staring at her fingertips. Mary stopped drawing and sighed. It just really grates my nutmeg having to fight all the time." "I know," said Rory. "And the people who do this stuff. I still haven't forgiven Sergio Sequin for that shit he pulled in '78, you know?" Rory nodded. Even now, he would meet some listeners who insisted that every disco song sounded the same. They had no idea of the dark bargain that Sergio Sequin had struck to hold the top 5 spots on the chart at the same time with the same song. They also had no idea of the other battles that Mary had fought. The two sat quietly beneath the low-lying blanket of barlight. Rory could imagine that to anyone else, they were just two people in their late 50s or early 60s, surveying the patrons who hung like ornaments from the bar counter beside him. But he knew that Mary's mind was wandering the same path as his, listening to the music, parsing it for clues or ideas. One song ended, the next began. Rory heard the opening chords of Halifax Busker and turned to Mary to trade frowns. "Wasn't this playing when we came in?" she said. Rory nodded. "Someone in here trying to spin a pattern?" They both had started to stand when a hiccup in the song brought it back to the beginning of the track. They sat down, Rory letting go of a knot that he hadn't realized he had tied in the muscles at the back of his neck. "And that, folks," he said, "is why everyone streams their playlists now and saves their CDs for making tacky wall art." Mary chuckled. "So much for no repeat Sundays," she said, her voice sliding down into the gravel-packed depths of the classic rock DJ's realm on those last words. One of the bar patrons turned. "Hey, you Mary Midnight?" Mary straightened her back. The one and only, baby. No shit. Used to listen to you on the force back in high school. You know, the man cleared his throat. Back before you. Mary pulled her smile tight like a drum skin. What, before I got this fabulous pair of tits? The man looked back and forth between Rory and Mary. I was going to say before you transitioned, he whispered. She knows, said Rory. She's just fucking with you. Oh, am I now? Mary blinked. How kind of you to inform me. They both turned back to the bar patron, who regarded them as if they were sharks he just realized were swimming around him in his pool. Slowly, he slid off his stool and tightrope walked toward Mary. Look, he said, my daughter was doing a report on local moments in culture for her sociology class or something, and when I told her I had listened to you, before, and we started talking about what it must have been like for you. He looked straight at Mary. It was the first time she'd really talked to me about anything in months. Oh, Mary said. Rory had forgotten how rare it was to see Mary taken aback. Well, thank you. I'm really glad for you two. Could I ask you to, I don't know, sign a napkin or something? Mary smiled. I'll do you one better, baby. You got a phone, right? Rory, could you? The man got his phone from his pocket and passed it to Rory, who took the picture as Mary puckered her lips an inch away from the man's cheek. There, is that okay? She'll have a good time with that one, I promise you. The man looked at the picture and laughed. Oh man, she wouldn't have believed me. This is perfect. He shook both Mary and Rory's hands before heading back to his bar stool. Sometimes I wish I didn't know how good a charm ambassador I was and didn't like doing it, said Mary, sitting down. For sure, said Rory. I thought the part about your boobs was especially charming. Mary smiled, leaning in close across the table. So, you know when the next Jules Horace show is? Mary Midnight is a character that was a ton of fun to write. But in this scene, the moment where she says, maybe I don't want to be a charm ambassador all the time. Maybe I want to get angry. That to me was the moment where she got real. So I'm glad you got to hear it. Hope you'll join me next time for part 3 as Mary and Rory continue to try to figure out what is going on with local artist Jules Horace and his hit song What I Lose Now. Well, until next time, take care. And as always, thanks for joining me on the Short Story Corner.